So it's a bit of a different type of video, this one, as I'm usually the person putting together dream teams and fantasy booking players to hop across the Rubicon and join all sorts of clubs to create weird and wonderful combinations. However, there has been a ton of business already conducted so far this year, which makes a lot of sense as the player marketplace in the UK has never been more competitive. Outside threats such as the French first and second divisions flirt with top talent regularly, offering more game time, often more money, and the opportunity to play in the sun. Now, that's an incredibly difficult opportunity to turn down if you're a second string guy trying to battle through into Newcastle Falcons' first team. What I do find interesting is the sheer amount of squad planning and pre contract agreements which are done so early into the season. It must be such an unusual sensation going into November, not even halfway into the competition, and knowing you won't be around for the following season. It means directors of rugby and senior coaches have to strike such a unique balance of blooding youngsters, rotating those that need game time, and still playing their absolute best 15 in order to scrap a victory in what has become the most competitive and balanced Premiership ever. There has never been so much turnover in talent in a single year in my lifetime, with some sides signing and parting company with over 20 players moving into next year. It almost feels as if it's draft season rather than transfer silly season. So I thought I'd take the opportunity at the time of writing, which is the 15th of April, to grade all of the Premiership pending in signings that have been confirmed across the league so far. The sources I'll be using are a mixture of club reports, All Rugby, ESPN, and Ultimate Rugby, but trust me, I have done all the cross referencing that I could do, as online rugby journalism is a barrenous waste of misinformation and barely curated nonsense. So I will dive into each club and scour through their transfers, both pending in and out, to let you know what I think of them and how it affects the squad moving forward. I will then grade the club based on a unique system that you'll see light up on your screen now, ranking from title challenges all the way through to relegation fodder. That being said, that statement doesn't really make any sense anymore due to relegation being a relic of the past in modern day egg ball, so we will go in alphabetical order, and we will start with Bath, which, to be fair, is one of the easiest clubs to summarise on this list as they've barely done any business. Earlier this season, we obviously saw the veteran Piers Francis leave to join Kurita Water Gush over in Japan, and Fergus Lee Warner head back to Oz to join up with a pretty awful Waratahs side. Neither players were realistically going to be in the starting squad next season, so it's a nice piece of squad pruning. However, Matt Gallagher is the first significant name that will be departing the club to head over to Italy and put on the famous green shirt of Benetton. In an ideal world, that transfer doesn't have to happen, as Matt Gallagher is one of the finest fullbacks in the league on his day, and absolutely top four level. He's just 27 years old too, so you're losing him just as he reaches his peak years, and a lot of game time investment might fall to the wayside. However, Bath have the infrastructure in place for this not to be too much of a problem, as Tom de Glanville seems to be the preferred option this year anyway, and he's been ripping up trees. They also have Brendan Owen, who is a decent squad rotation option, and George Warboys and Orlando Bailey can both do a job there as well. Johannes Jonker is also leaving, which again is uncomfortable but not a massive loss. He's only played 299 minutes of rugby this season and started 4 games, 2 of which came in the Premiership Rugby Cup. He was never going to break up that starting front row, and a trip to France makes absolute sense to me. And then in terms of pending in, Bath have just the one player, but my God, what a signing. 21-year-old Guy Pepper will be joining the West Country side from Newcastle, which is a real scalp for the future. Pepper has been awesome this season in terms of breaking the record for the most tackles in a single game, and also being right up there with total tackles this entire league season. He's fearless, he works his backside off, he's already being included in the England training sides, and he would be a wicked starting 23 option to cover injuries to the likes of Underhill and Reed, of which there have been plenty of the last 2 seasons. So I would probably rank Bath in the title challenges section, as they've invested in one player who has the potential to be a superstar, and they've only really lost players who are used in sparing rotation anyway, which would be easy backfills for the academy or shopping in the championship. Bristol are next, and they've conducted a ton of business so far. They haven't really had many players leave mid-season, with Charlie Rice just heading out on loan to Cornish Pirates and Kofi Cripps heading to Clifton, but they do have 2 massive transfers pending out of this side. Kyle Sinclair will be departing the side to join Toulon in the top 14, and even though over the last 2 seasons he's been miles off of his best, Bristol still have one of the best scrums in the league, and one of the best set pieces too. His partnership that he's forged with Ellis Genge has created a really intimidating weapon that sides are really reluctant to test. When I move on to who's joining the club, I think there is a downgrade in there, and I think it's sad to see a World Cup finalist leave England in such a quiet and unremarkable circumstance. Callum Sheedy is also leaving, which I think is the even bigger problem here. Sure, he's been second fiddle to McGinty when McGinty has been fit, but Bristol have no depth at 10 whatsoever and are heavily reliant on him picking up a ton of minutes. He's also 28 and in his prime, and has been a really loyal and strong servant to this Bristol side for years. It makes sense for his career to cross back over the bridge to Cardiff, but I do worry for the significant hole that he will leave in this Bristol outfit. And then as for those joining the club, I've got to say I'm not a huge fan of the due diligence done here. Stevie Longwell was a pickup from Jersey Reds after they went under, and at 34, he was pretty much brought in on the short-term contract to cover injuries, which I don't think is unwise. Lovejoy Chawatama is the big name here, though, joining from Premiership rivals in Harlequins to replace Sinclair. I'm not a really big fan of this move at all, as he barely gets a look in for that side that are only a place higher than them in the table this season. And although he was a stalwart during that 2022-2023 season for London Irish, just 248 minutes of rugby this year and 3 starts this season feels like Quins were pretty happy to offload him, as they were underwhelmed with his move over. At 31 years old, the age profile doesn't really work for me either, and it just feels like a big downgrade on the experienced international. Big Bill Matter will be joining Bristol next season too, which as far as superstar names go is right up there. He's been a talisman for Fiji and Edinburgh for the last few years and is often the most talented player on the park. He's also very reliable, having put up 1,781 minutes of rugby so far this season across international and club sport, and 1,714 minutes across rugby comps last year too. He's an absolute unit at 6'5" and 116 kgs. However, this either signals Luatua leaving or overzealous purchasing for me, because at 32 years old, he's a starting option to win trophies right now. As much as I want to love seeing Big Bill in the Premiership, I just don't think it's a signing that Bristol necessarily needed, as there are many more glaring holes in the squad and there are plenty of very capable South Sea Island number 8s available in the Pro de Deux and top 14 right now. So with 2 big names leaving the club and 2 fairly big names joining the club, how would I rank Bristol? Well, although I think they've looked resurgent in the last few rounds, I don't think really either signings complement what Bristol need right now and how Bristol are currently playing, so I'd probably put them in the painful season section, which for Bristol fans, I imagine is the last thing you want to hear happen again. Moving on to Exeter, who are a club that have never really relied on big flashy signings and are continuing to go through their very own turnover of talent. It's been a big rebuild job for Baxter, who so far has reaffirmed his credentials as one of the best player development coaches in world rugby. They've already had a couple of players leave so far this season, including Frankie Knoll and Tom Hendrickson, with Hendrickson in particular being a bit of a shame, as I really liked his profile and experience against this new look Exeter side, and he ended up leaving to join a side in Japan. Other players that Exeter have already confirmed will be leaving are Patrick Schickerling, who has just made 1 start for Exeter all season despite having featured 35 times in the last 2 seasons for the Southwestern club. He will be joining Glasgow next season to help bulk up their front row ranks. Alec Hepburn will also be departing the club to join Scarlets of all places, which I think is a very odd move for him. At 31 years old and again only having started 3 games this season, it feels like a very necessary offload if he's not fancied anymore moving forwards anyway. He'll already go down as a club great, having supported the side in their Champions Cup and league winning campaigns as a real stalwart in that pack. And then another unsurprising name to add onto that list is Johnny Gray, who's been absolutely anonymous at the club all season. After suffering a horrible knee injury last year, he hasn't really put up any minutes for Exeter this season and is unlikely to feature at all for the rest of the year. I think this is about right for Chiefs now as well, as at 30 years old with a bit of an injury record, he served the club unbelievably well, but shouldn't be part of the project moving forward. As for players joining the club, the tight head prop Jimmy Roots will be hopping over from Ealing Trailfinders next season. He looks to be a really tidy pickup, as he's a big strong boy playing in the most dominant front row in Championship Rugby, the same front row that absolutely mullered Leicester Tigers in the Premiership Cup. He's just 24 years old, he stands at 6'2" and weighs 20 stone. He's the right age profile, size and experience that Exeter should be in the market for, and he has a really high ceiling. So if I were to rate Exeter's transfers, I'd say that they will squeeze into Europe next season. There's nothing unbelievable there, but dropping high earners who are currently dead wood for minutes and offloading them quickly is a great bit of business, and we know their academy always pulls through to take a lot of the monetary burden away. Gloucester have conducted a crazy amount of business already this year, with some big names heading in and out of the club all over the continent. I'm really hopeful for Gloucester next season as well, as they've shown in recent weeks that when at full strength, they can pretty much take anyone head on, and their game plan is beginning to come together. They've had plenty of players already leave so far this season, with the likes of Bradbury sadly retiring, Mark Atkinson retiring, Louis Rees-Zammit also headed over to the NFL, Ben Donnell will be heading to Cardiff, and Jack Singleton was loaned to Toulon. I'd love to see Singleton come back to the UK after tearing it up in the top 14 to hopefully really lay stake to that starting hooker spot for Gloucester, but big part of me thinks that there isn't really the incentive for him to come back and that he should stay in France. As for other players leaving, Alex Hurl has confirmed that he'll be joining Newcastle this season, which makes sense as Gloucester have a fair amount of depth in that back three. Adam Hastings will be joining Glasgow, and I think that's a massive shame for how this transfer never really worked out, as it looked excellent on paper. He's been just far too injury prone and lacking in consistent minutes for Gloucester to really extend his contract anyway, so I think it's an amicable divorce. Santi Tessina will also be joining my favourite Pro de Deux side in Agen next season, and will be linking up with the big Frances that I interviewed on this channel earlier this spring, and that's about it for who's confirmed so far. Coming into the side are three huge names who you'd all expect to feature frequently in that starting 23. Thomas Williams joins from Cardiff, which is a huge statement signing to me, as he's one of the finest nines in the British Isles at the moment. He was great for Wales during a pretty awful Six Nations campaign, and he's had a similar playing disparity whilst being at Cardiff this season. What does this mean for Stephen Varney? Well, I'm not sure, but I, like many others, think that there is no smoke without fire, so he's likely going to be heading to Zebra to link up with the other Italian boys. Gareth Anscombe will also join the side to add much needed game management, experience, and place kicking success. I think his tutorage of somebody like Charlie Atkinson might be really important for Gloucester moving forward. So in the short term, I'm a big fan of this free agent signing. And then a really left field pick came out of nowhere, with Christian Wade joining the side next season. As one of the Premiership's all-time best finishers and still an athletic monster, Wade has done really well in sparing minutes since rejoining rugby with Racing last season. I think he still has a lot to offer and could do a real job for a Gloucester side needing to execute on landing more points. One thing I have to note though is that those three signings coming at 29, 33 and 33 years old alike, so they are very temporary with a focus on winning now, which in fairness is what I think this Gloucester fan base needs, with Hartpury hopefully providing the foundation for younger talent behind them. But how would I rate Gloucester? Well, I'm happy to say that I think they would also squeeze into Europe, as I think they've upgraded a couple of areas with experience and proven ability, but I don't really like the age profile all too much, and these players aren't like-for-like replacements for who is leaving the side. Harlequins have also done a bunch of business so far this season, with many more players departing than heading through the door. Earlier this season, we bid farewell to Luke Wallace, who retired at 33 years old, and Makeen Ali Khan, who will be leaving to join Dallas back in the USA. In terms of players confirmed to be leaving the squad, there are some really big names here. Louis Liner will be leaving to join the ranks at Benetton, which makes absolute sense with his international ambitions. Andre Esterhazen is probably the biggest British transfer confirmed yet this season. He'll be heading back home to join the Sharks next season. As already mentioned, Lovejoy Chawatama will be leaving to join Bristol Bears, and the veteran Will Collier will be getting his dues, playing over for a really interesting Castres side next season. Now that's three starters who are leaving Quins in a single window. So should fans be worried about that? Well, maybe, as they've only really confirmed one signing in the door yet in Titi Lamasateli from Montpellier. If you listen to my Fixing Your Club video, you might already know that I'm not a big fan of this signing whatsoever. Montpellier have been absolutely dreadful this season, and their scrum hasn't been that much better either. Lamasateli has also previously moved on from Saracens, as he couldn't quite disrupt that starting crew. He's a massive unit, don't get me wrong, with Premiership experience, so it isn't all bad, but again, I just think there's a little bit more research and due diligence that could have been done, and Quins could have picked up a much better fit for a portion of the price. The rest of Quins' players confirmed are all loanees from London Scottish, as they continue to forge that unique relationship that can only benefit them moving forward. And whilst I think Harlequins will be fine next season and likely be in that top 4 race again, on the basis of transfers alone, I'd have to put them in painful season. If they weren't so competitive this year and such strong title challenges, then this sort of track record in signing would see them fall towards that relegation fodder zone. But let's face it, Quins are a million miles away from dropping into that area of the table in real life, so I'm not just going to put them there in this video just for the sake of some clickbait clickbait likes. And there we have it for part 1. I'll make sure to pump out part 2 as soon as possible. It just takes a little while to get the information together to write these scripts. If you like this video, make sure that you leave a like. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. And if you're watching this on TikTok, make sure that you follow me for more rugby content.